Welcome to this online seminar, The University and the Anthropocene, an event where we will discuss the role that universities can, should, or must play in the upcoming sustainability transformation. This event is a part of the Groningen Climate Action Fortnight and sponsored by DAG, a student organization called the Democratische Academie Groningen. My name is Daniel Boston. I will be the moderator for this evening. And some preliminary remarks. Before we begin, I'd like to say a few words about the concept of Anthropocene. While this is generally understood to be a new geological epoch in which humans are the driving factor for change, it has long transcended its narrow definition and use. Yet, there are a few critiques which are made and we feel need to be addressed, at least briefly, prior to using the concept. One of the major critiques is directed at the homogenizing nature of human impact. In essence, that the Anthropocene hides intrahuman inequalities and the vast differences in historical responsibilities for climate change and environmental destruction. Be that as it may, we nonetheless believe that the Anthropocene is a powerful concept that, if carefully used, possesses extraordinary explanatory power. Now, to get into the structure and some of the housework for this seminar, the event will be loosely structured in three parts. During the first part, we will look more closely at the role of university in society and ask questions such as, can the university be a sustainability champion? The second part will take a closer look at sustainability in education, how it can be implemented, who should it be for, why is interdisciplinarity considered to be so valuable? And lastly, we seek to ground all of this in praxis by asking, what is the role of students in this transformation? Especially the last part will be structured as a debate, which will allow for further input from you. Generally, participation in this seminar will be amply provided. So we would like you to actively participate, to make this as inclusive as possible, and are looking forward to hearing your questions, thoughts, remarks, etc. To do so during the entire seminar, you can post your questions in the Q&A function. I will keep a close look at that. And during the last part, but I will explain this a bit more in detail during the later part, we will give you an opportunity to actually speak up and voice some of your thoughts and make valuable contributions. Now, I believe I've spoken enough, so let me introduce our guest speaker for today. Sanli Faez is assistant professor at the physics department of Utrecht University, and his main research interests are nano-optics, nano-ionics. He's also a member of Utrecht Young Academy, which has appealed to the Utrecht University leadership to step up sustainability ambitions and sign the Climate Action Pledge. The Climate Action Pledge embodies both the acknowledgement of the high risk of our current national policies and the urgency of action, as well as key suggestions for an adequate response to the climate crisis. We have invited him here today to speak with us about the topic of climate change and, more importantly, the role of the university in the upcoming sustainability transformation. Earlier this year, Sanli published an article in Science Guide in which he called for a complete rethink of the way in which academics and academia in general should approach and act in the climate crisis we currently find ourselves in. Sanli, first of all, thanks for being here with us and taking the time to discuss this urgent topic. If it's all right with you, why don't we start off by you sharing your motivation for writing that article and how you become invested in this topic in the first place?
Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate that this is a student-led activity, and I think that's very important. I hope that we come back to this discussion during this evening. Yeah, so I'm a physicist. I'm not a climate scientist, although I have, our institute is just adjacent to a climate institute, so I listened to their talks for the past several years. But I was just interested in my little topic, like many scientists that try to focus on what they are very good at and just advance that in their groups. I was interested in building microscopes or more accurate microscopes and doing that in a very dark lab. And that was most of my attention, including many summer breaks, which are spent on usually also going to conferences or doing workshops, organizing them. And there was, I think, after several summers, for the first time I took a relatively longer break for my summer vacation in summer 2019, and I decided to take books with me to read which are not related to my topic of research, optics. And well, by some, it's not completely accidental, but most of those books were from different aspects, paying attention to the climate change issue. And well, it was a tough summer, I must say. If you ask for my family, I was mostly unpresent because I was deeply impressed and under influence of these books that I read. And yeah, it took me some time to digest it, and also got me very nervous and excited at the same time that we cannot just, this is not anymore, the problem of my colleagues in the Climate Institute to solve. It's my problem as well, as a father and as an immigrant. One of the books actually I read that summer is a very, very thin book. It's called Untitled, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder, which has been written completely different topic than climate. But I think this phenomena is so large that it will influence our political systems as well as our economic systems. And one of the chapters, most of the chapters, of course, I've read in other books which I've seen before, but one of the chapters which was especially touching a nerve for me was this chapter about institutions, that when there is a threat of tyranny, be cautious and be protective of institutions. And this is a bit sort of counter to general sort of revolutionary idea of young generations, perhaps, which I count myself in, that sort of sometimes go with the motto of, if some institutions are not functioning the way you want, just build a new one and make the institution obsolete. But here says that, you have to keep institutions. And there is, I mean, if you think about it, there is a good reason. If we have this transformation afterwards, the university will exist for sure. So the institutions are there. The question is that how they will perform and which direction they will take. And that was where I sort of had the trigger that, yes, I might become active myself, make myself more knowledgeable. But if I want to really have a bigger impact, amplify my impact, I need to actually take my institution along. That's the place that I have a say in. I know the people. I can sort of find allies for my motion. So as soon as I came back from a vacation, I first of all talked to the most trusted colleagues I have at the university across faculties, and that's in the Utrecht Young Academy. We had a sort of pretty heated discussion of what we should be doing on this topic. Young Academy had activities related to climate before, were mostly about outreach. But then we said, well, we do outreach, we give more knowledge, more facts, but what about our own institutions? And that's where sort of things started rolling. We wrote a letter that we needed the university board to take a bolder action. And we also, right from the beginning, knew that this cannot be just, voice of the young academics. So we started talking to the senior faculty members, one by one, trying to gather their support and signature for the text, adapting the text in the process. I think it took about 6-7 weeks until we had 40 signatures, and then sent a letter to the board, which immediately had a reaction of inviting us to talk about it. But of course, that was a sort of a letter that everybody could support. There was actually discussions around it. After that, I thought, well, what would be the ideal I have in mind? And I wrote that in a separate piece on my own initiative and personal title. And then that's the piece that appeared in the Science Guide later, which is quite different from the letter we wrote to the board, but it involves some of the suggestions, some of the ideas that we had also in that letter, maybe with a more bold language and without much having the sort of precautions taken out of it. And that I parked in Science Guide. That was before COVID hit, just for my future reference. In that process afterwards, we also thought that, okay, how we can make actually this action more concrete. We came up with the Climate Action Pledge, this is sort of an abbreviation of both what's the situation in hand, acknowledging that this is a serious risk. Even this acknowledgement, I don't think it's very old that it's publicly acknowledged. This is more new that academics actually acknowledges, and also in some way wrote our view of what has to be done. The main goal of this to be to sort of have a moment of pause and say, up to here we have agreed, so let's stick to it, and then we build on top of this with further actions afterwards. And we presented this to the board of the university during the Pathways to Sustainability conference, and we got the sort of agreement with the pledge, or general agreement with the spirit of the pledge during that event. And sort of that was the pause moment. The next step would have been to bring these actions into the strategic plan of the university. That's one direction of things that we have done. We had several other projects, really outreach projects and activities that we did also in parallel.
Now, then maybe let me start with some questions here. Maybe we start with the most basic questions. Since sustainability is the issue we have here at hand, what would you say? What is your understanding of sustainability from a university perspective? What should it mean?
I think there are two parts. There's this sustainable governance and development in the society that we are part of. This is at the university, as far as I've seen, mostly an academic idea so far. There are some parts that people have engaged into bringing this into practice, but at least the academics which I talk to and they work on sustainability, they still write articles. Some of them also sort of go to policy decision meetings, things like that. But the most output is research. That's one way of looking at sustainability at the university. The other thing is that university is an institution like any other institution, so there is a sort of emphasis to go with the mood of the day and to also adapt to the needs of the day, and sort of being energy neutral, being a sustainable organization, calculating the carbon footprint. These are the actions which sort of are the operations of the university involved, and this is also one way that sustainability is sort of addressed at the university. What I would like to say, and it's actually the most difficult way of looking, I guess, at the sustainability of university, is that actually how the university positions itself. What is the social contract of the university with a society which has transitioned into sustainability, being a circular economy or something that actually has less pressure on the natural resources of the planet. If we imagine that, what would be the sort of role of the university in that society? That would be also, let's say, maybe a third look at what is a sustainable university, that is a university in a sustainable society.
Could you elaborate a bit on that thought, specifically the role of the university in a circular economy?
Yeah, I mean, university at the end is a governmental institution, right? So you can say that university can never be sustainable if the government which is supporting it or financing it has not gone fully sustainable, right? The same with the carbon footprint. You cannot say that university is carbon neutral while the government which supports it still has not gone the path of becoming carbon neutral. The same you can say with all the other aspects of sustainability, all the other factors. I look at it futuristically. So, let's say we make this transition, but my guess is that university will have a different contract, right? We can look historically, right? After during the World War, that's where the research universities started to expand. The contracts that came afterwards is that research should win the war, to be very brutal, and that's where the most support was. If you're engineer, you help, and if you're not, just go and clean the guns.
Yes.
After that, of course, there was a moment of peace and there was a moment of growth. So there was the role of educating. So there was a rapid expansion of universities and education. Bringing society to a higher level of education was the task which was accepted by universities. And after a while, it became also a bit too costly, just reached the limits. We had maybe between 80s until 1980s and 2000, we had the time that university had to also fulfill an economic role or contribute to economic growth. So there were all these calculations that came of what's the economic role of the university, how much added value and university education gives to a certain person, all the way to the extremes of calculating, how much better paid job you will get after you graduate, so you can put a price tag on a degree. These are practices. We had, for example, in Europe also the valorization of which is already obsolete. The fact that university should also be giving economic contributions. So the knowledge of university should come back directly to the economic practices. That's sort of something that is going now on. The role of health was always very big. So after the war or during the war, there was, physics was a big spender, but since the 80s, time of peace, health is, the majority of research is gone towards health. So increase the health was a mission. These are all the things that sort of generally, I would say, the mood of that the society or certain parts of the society in the Western world asks from its universities. Now imagine there is a moment that to say, the society is, we cannot actually, and these are all, of course, financed by the same parts that the rest of the growth is financed. It is financed by the economic activity, which we know that is energy intensive and dirty so far. So there is a while that the governments or the even cities are faced with the very difficult task of, for example, following the commitment to the Paris Agreement, and then they will also ask the universities to contribute to that. That is, I would say, that with the university I see that has its all in a sustainable society.
What you're describing sounds like the university should take up a reactive role and should basically fulfill the function that is determined by other actors. Do you think that there's value in the university becoming a bit more proactive and trying to actively influence existing debates?
Yeah, I think there is certainly value in that. What I'm saying is that university is a big and complex organization without a central head. It is sort of a union of agreements. Most scientists, individual scientists, are much more faithful to their communities, to their scientific communities, than to university. Many go to the extreme that university is just a set of buildings connected by a central heating system, and then the academics do what they have to do. We don't have to impose anything on them. So it's pretty difficult to steer a very big ship, which is the university, we call it, because the individuals are highly intelligent people that choose their course and choose their path. So in some sense, financing the research has been one way of redirecting the path of the university. And I think in that, universities have been mostly reactive. It's not that they have the upper say of how much of the GDP is spent on research, for example. They usually follow what is given to them. But of course, on the curriculum, university had usually had, or as a whole, the academic programs had the upper hand of deciding what would be the proper education that the next generation managers, the next generation graduates take. And there, a lot of sort of progressive values are injected into the practice for the next generation through the curriculum. So in that sense, I think that's also where the academics are finding the simplest to sort of put their heart there and say, I don't go into politics, I don't like politics, but I do all my passion into teaching, so I teach the future. And they are very easy with that. And the emphasis of telling the story in simple language in all these different places, emphasizing that I'm going to adapt my teaching to the needs of sustainable development goals. That is something that every academic is very sort of comfortable with. But to say that I'm going to protest or I'm going to sort of become an activist, that is something that's, many academics are not so comfortable with. And as a result, also the university is not generally very comfortable with that.
Do you see that as an issue? or as an issue that needs to be overcome, or do you see that rather as something that grows out of the nature of the current university?
I think in normal times I would have been fine because the society slowly progresses and that is fine. In times of transformation and rapid change, I think there's also a matter of pragmatism. If there is a new social contract being written, and we all see that, well, do you want to have a say in writing of this social contract, or you want to let others write it for you and you sign at the end? That's the question. It is still a difficult topic, right? I don't know. I mean, I've not read much of history, but I can imagine, what the academics in, 1920s and 1930s were thinking or trying to act. You can ask them, should they become politically active when they see, the rise of fascism in a part of Europe, or what should they do? I actually don't know what they have done, but I'm pretty sure at that time the new social contract, which is not what we like, but it was a new social contract, was imposed on them. And well, that's my part. I mean, as a pragmatic point of view, I think it's good to have a say in writing of this social contract because the stakes are very high.
Taking that into consideration, maybe to become a bit more practical, how should the university actually go about, I guess, taking part in the rewriting? What are the steps to getting there? Do you have specific ideas as to what could be done?
Well, maybe as an institute, my university does not have necessarily much say on what the policies are. But at individual, I mean, the science is still a highly respected domain in our society, even now. Especially now we see that if you listen to surveys and polls, scientists are among the highest trusted people. So as scientists, we can certainly influence policy and influence what happens to the society. So that is a part that the university community, let's put it, can influence. Also, universities as sort of aggregation of intentions and aggregations of power can be very influential. We have maybe, 2,000, 3,000 professors in Netherlands, but we only have 10 universities. So, of course, that's a natural funnel of funneling what change that is necessary. But of course, it also increases the complexity of doing it. So again, it's a big vessel. It's very difficult to turn itself in one or another direction. But if it turns, it also has a good momentum in that direction. So that's how sort of change goes.
Regarding the current situation, what would you say are the most impactful factors which stop the necessary change from happening? Could you put a finger on that?
Maybe the fact that we are still quite occupied with our daily practices, the position of relative insecurity, the sort of short-term horizon of decisions. That's, I think, one part of the problem. There is no sort of possibility of long-term envisioning. I mean, a big company has sort of 10-year, 20-year vision, and they have been quite actually good at predicting. But that type of analytical scope we really do not have at the university. We are focused mostly on the current and maybe the next few years. It gives us sort of an advantage that we are quite knowledgeable. So we understand things and we react things, or we create knowledge in the institution. So that gives the upper hand, but it's not intentional that we would like to the institution of the university to be in this position in a few years.
Maybe just to the participants watching, you can, again, as I said in the beginning, you can post your questions anytime. We're also now at the point where I would be moving towards asking some of your questions. So feel free to interject and let us know if there's anything that you would like to ask. Besides this, before some additional questions come in, it sounds like it sounds like the capability of scholars and university staff to be able to answer to this sustainability or issue of sustainability is very much tied in with other issues such as the working conditions in academia. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that is true. As I said, the academics are pretty social creatures, so they react to their immediate environments very strongly, and that sort of also protects them or isolates them from the bigger sort of issues, but also bounds them to the current practices more than they can sort of be maverick and do their own paths. Very few have done that, and this is the same on many other issues. Like we have discussion of, changing the way research is done. We have discussion of making databases open, research practices open. A lot of discussions that I had in the past on topic of, for example, open science also comes that, we are bound to the sort of the practices of the game, the rules of the game, and so we cannot be sort of single-handedly swim against the flow. This is something that you hear quite often. And even if a nation comes together, like Netherlands, the Dutch scientists come together and say, let's do science differently, there's always a big group of people say, oh, this is an international market, an international society, so we cannot be the brave Junge, that we say, and then do things differently from, I don't know, Germany, China, or United States. So as you see, it is very much entangled, and this entanglement is protected to some degree. I understand it. To some degree, it makes it very difficult to expect sort of a lot of progressive action from university.
Yeah, thanks very much. We have a question from, actually, we now have two questions from the participants. The first one is, as a physicist, does it scare you that such a big portion of society does not listen to you or your colleagues?
I don't think they don't listen. I think the knowledge is there. I don't know. Maybe I don't know how much is that. Of course, the deep knowledge of what it takes is not there. But the facts are communicated, are underground. People know them more or less. They don't know what to do with these facts. But I think that's the same with the scientists. We also don't know what to do with these facts generally, and not every academic agrees with what we should do with these facts. So that has been the bottleneck. So maybe we need sociologists to solve this. But it's not, the physical facts are very well known for a very long time. And I think recently also better communicated. There are interruptions, deliberate interruptions in casting doubt on this. This is a different story, but this is there. But I think people will understand. When you tell them the world is warming, they would sort of, most people will accept it. But what would be the impact on their personal life? That's a topic that scientists per se cannot answer. Although I don't say that they should not think about. If you really want to have a good communication about this topic, you have to meet people where they are and tell them what is the impact on their life. And this is sort of a complicated science communication problem and not necessarily a physics problem. That's the part which I think more and more scientists who are getting sort of active are trying to learn. And that's, I think, where the most gain can be made in the communications.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. And actually, this ties in with the next question, which we have, and also the second part of the discussion, which we'll slowly move into. But first of all, let me read the question. It says, I noticed that when talking about sustainability at the university, the discussion quite quickly turns towards the campus operations, recycling, vegetarian catering, etc. The way in which universities can contribute to a sustainable future through education, research, and valorization is often ignored. How can we shift the conversation to include these often ignored areas of improvement?
Yeah. Well, this is exactly what we also put our fingers on, and we tried to do that. My colleague gave me this example of, there's this law firm in Australia, which, it's completely sustainable as an organization, carbon neutral, but they are actually taking cases for the sort of fossil fuel industry in Australia. So is that sustainable action or not. The same can apply for the university. One reason is very pragmatic. For the university administration, it's very easy to command that, you know, we have to have this source of energy, or we have to have this sort of food in our canteen. It's much more difficult to say to the researchers from one year to the other that you have to, you know, focus on these topics. There's huge resistance to being normative, or, you know, having top-down guidelines of what research to do. Plus, a lot of research is not even dictated by the university, but by the external financiers, and those totally different actors. This also allows to shift the responsibility from the university to the funders, and from the funders to the university. That's another topic that makes it extremely difficult to talk about. Third, there are many academics which are sort of happy with the current system, and they are not generally willing to engage in this. As I think one place that we can actually gain a lot to make this speakable, and this is not only in academia, till workplace is generally a place that talking about the climate issue is sort of an irrelevant topic. You know, if you are anxious about, I don't know, the impact of climate change, you go to the club and talk to the people who are like-minded, you know, to go activist group. But when it comes to your workplace, you generally don't talk about it. So talking about it is very, very important. I think that's number one activity that's at the workplace. If people talk more, you know, just telling their observations, their emotions, it makes a big change. For example, one of the projects we did during the last year, although it was an outreach project, but the actual purpose of it was for this to be a talkable point. And this was this 1.5-minute videos, which we asked different colleagues to just talk about what a 1.5 degree warmer world means for their discipline, or from the perspective of their discipline. And we only recorded these videos with the intention of showing them on the walls of the campus. We have these TVs, and before COVID, they went to sort of just circular streaming on these walls, with the impact of just making this speakable. I mean, climate is put on the sort of basket of societal problems, and in the departments we talk about, I don't know, physics and mathematics, or maybe teaching a little bit, the impact of teaching, but we leave the societal issues behind the door of office and come here with a peace of mind. So that's, I think, one way of making it. You really have to make the academic community to talk about it and bring it up in the issue. Similar to the, for example, the issue of work pressure, right? This is, of course, for a very long time, it was a taboo to complain, but then more people talked about it. It was first at the coffee corners, and then it became sort of on top of the agendas, and now it's on top of the political side. Back to it over and over again. I think the students are doing a very good job in this respect, I must say. The new generation of students, I always tell my colleagues who say, you know, yes, you could have taught your lecture the same for past things, but when the strikers come to university, you have to adapt your lectures.
Yes. We have two more questions, and the first question is about the cooperation of specifically the University of Groningen, but I would argue this holds true across universities. The cooperation with unsustainable industries such as the fossil fuel industry. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, as an institution, I would say this is not just a personal responsibility. Of course, this is a responsibility, but well, the biggest institutions we cooperate with is the government, right? And so one can say, you know, cooperation with the government is along that line. We are still living in this society, and we are still, you know, have to breathe the same air as the society. We have to try to play the impartial role. All these companies are in sort of have a say because they are strong and they are powerful on other decision makings in the society, including the decision makings done for science investment and the universities. So it is not sort of that straightforward from one day to another. Of course, we can make the pressure all the time and make it sort of socially unacceptable. The way doing research for sort of cigarette companies became socially unacceptable, or doing research which is funded by food industry became socially unacceptable. This is what we can do, but the rest, university is a sort of legal entity bound to the same laws as the other institutions in the society. Yeah, maybe it's not very sort of positive, convincing answer. Of course, university can react because community of the university is an important part. If all the university community demands something, the university goes towards that. But I don't think it can come sort of spontaneously from university that we no more collaborate with certain factions which are still legally operating in the society. I mean, University of Cambridge had just after many years of campaigning, just last week announced that they are going to divest from fossil fuels, and it took several years of campaigning to reach there. And this is by 2030, so it's also quite a long horizon. And still, they collaborate. If the project comes along, I think this collaboration can take place. It is not in the academic code of conduct that I know that you cannot collaborate. If you want to do that, we have to, on part, also make that part of the academic code of conduct. I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, thanks very much. The next question actually brings us to our second part of this online seminar, which is the role of sustainability in education. And the question asks, how can climate change, its causes and effects, can be looked at from different disciplines, and how could we bridge these gaps? This ties in with the question of interdisciplinarity and what role that should play and why it is so important. But before we get to that question, I would like to start off firstly with what role should sustainability, more broadly speaking, should play in education, and how can we implement it?
So I'm trying to distinguish between your question and sort of the interdisciplinary part. It comes back to the original sort of discussion we had on the what is a sustainable university. And of course, education is one part. This was always have been the social contract. It still is one bold aspect of our social contract that we have to educate. And you can see that sustainability in education should come because we see and we know that society wants to know more, and it is getting more and more important for you. So again, meeting the future generations on their requests, one has to include that, because many people now want to know, if 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we wanted to go to a bank or to a big international company, many people now would like to work in the sustainability sector, whatever that is. And so we have to teach them what they need to know. That's one aspect. The other is that even if they don't go to that sector, they will be faced with this. If you are to become a manager or a banker, you have to actually respond to the demands of your organization.
Yes.
And we had in September this discussion with Valérie Masson-Delmotte, and she meets a lot of policymakers and politicians. And one of the observations she shared with us was that in discussions with the policymakers, the top managers, the people in positions of power, what she observes is that apart from some basics, they know very little, both about climate change, but also the impact of unsustainable living. Maybe the people who work with them, or the technical people, the specialized people who assist them know very well, but the people in positions of power themselves don't know much. And I think that's one part that has to be already, the gap should be filled. And I see that it's a responsibility of a teacher, any teacher now, to teach what is going to be useful for the students. I teach very sort of abstract fundamental subjects like solid state physics or experimental techniques. But since 2 years ago, I have put one day in my lessons and lectures just talking to students about the fact, what do they know, what do they think about the impact of climate change on their future. And it has been always very sincere, very nice discussion with the students, because I tell them, look, it will impact your life much more than it will impact my life. So you should tell me what you really want to know, and I need to know what you want. And we have very nice discussion around it. And we try to pivot some of our projects on topics which are related to the picture of future that most of the students commonly have. And I think sustainability is a big part of the picture that the young generation has about the future. So we cannot neglect that. We have to include it. That's the demand of the students.
In that case, let us talk about interdisciplinarity then, because as you said yourself, you teach something which is very specific, very abstract. Where do you see the value in that, and how do you think like interdisciplinarity can actually be reached, implemented potentially through courses?
Yeah, that's also very important. We had also again the discussion of what do you think people know about the physics of climate change. I think people can easily understand the mechanics. We can try to explain it again. This is not rocket science. We can explain it, and people understand it, accept it. But to make the connection of, oh, this is really impacting my life, my children's life, this is the part that it's very difficult for one discipline to convey. And I mean, then you convey that, then people say, oh, this, the future is destroyed. What I cannot do anything. So then you need another discipline. Say, no, you still have a lot of choices to make, and the future is not written in stone. We can impact it. We can change it. But then you have to make difficult decisions, right? Every individual have to make difficult decisions. How to make difficult decisions is again another topic that another discipline is dealing with. So the question is that, shall we just go through the process serially, step by step, or at the higher education level, we have to really bring all these aspects together, partly because we really don't have much time to wait for itself to sort of self-regulate or self-moderate towards correct action response to the knowledge. We have to do it sort of in a rapid fashion because the decision has to be made in a decade. That brings the necessity of actually also the teachers, the academics also talking beforehand. First of all, educating themselves, right? The fact that the type of message I tell you brings a different consequence of what I am intending to tell you. That's something I have to be very aware of, right? I mean, if you want to get a tangible, I mean, the discussion of masks in the sort of in the Netherlands, in the world, we can talk a lot about the sort of epidemiology study of the role of masks and things like that. But at the end, we would like to transfer it into the message: wear mask or don't wear mask, and that is a decision that impacts our knowledge, the impact of our policies, I must say, and this has to be embedded from the beginning of what we are going to discuss, what we are going to share, and how are we going to share this. And the same is with the topics of sustainability. It's a bit of slower process than spread of a pandemic, but it is similar. If I tell, water comes up in the Netherlands, so this is a very far distance from what I'm going to do with my housing, with my insurance, things like that. And this is not related to, whoever studies the geology of the delta works in the Netherlands, for example. And they have to talk to each other all the time. And this has to come forward in the education. I think this, we have no choice because of the urgency of this transformation and the complexity of it at the same time.
How would that play out in praxis? How would this shape the curriculum as well? Do you think that compulsory courses, for example, on societal, like broader societal issues would be a solution?
I think there are very good experiments, not necessarily related to sustainability, but societal problems, sort of learning in communities, community learning. There are practices which are done, say, mostly in social sciences and humanities, in a few places, but I think these are more exceptional cases also in beta, in engineering and hard sciences, that the society has been involved in definition of the problem. This is basically a case of that, what the society wants or needs for this problem to be useful for them. Few people do that, but I don't think this is a sort of mainstream approach. In education also, there are good examples I can think of that the stakeholders are involved in the education of the students, which are actually pretty smart thinkers. They are. You can ask them to think about examples just to train them, or you ask them to think about real problems, and still their input is very useful. I have seen sort of examples of this in a few courses, but this is not a general mood. I mean, you cannot have a textbook of impactful sort of education or impactful problem solving. I don't know of such a textbook. So it's very difficult to also make a course which doesn't have a textbook written.
If we look beyond the university and beyond university curricula and students, what do you think are the possibilities to address the broader public? You've already mentioned the necessity to educate decision makers such as CEO and policymakers, etc. But what about those who are not in positions of power, so to speak, but do count just among regular working people? Do you think there's value in that? And what do you think are the possibilities to do that and maybe go beyond the educational ivory tower?
Yeah, well, I think we should be perhaps a bit more humble and approach this from the position of humility, because I think people who want to get knowledge, they know where to get knowledge, and they are aware of these shortcomings. I mean, a lot of NGOs, a lot of cooperatives are already doing, sustainable farming. They are making communities in cities. Sustainable neighborhoods are emerging. So I think there one has to be humble and meet the needs of society where the needs are. I mean, if you want to, give some advice to farmers, first you have to start to talk to farmers and, meet them where they are and be sort of smart enough to translate what they need into a common perspective that also matches the evidence and matches the knowledge which is already available there. And from there start defining which knowledge can be necessary to transfer. So this is an approach that I'm pleased more with than having a lot of public lectures and then just trying to translate the latest sort of knowledge into something which is publicly accessible, which often actually also creates a bit of like illusion of progress. When there is a new discovery in genetics on cancer, the cancer patient might not see the fruits of this discovery until 20 years, 30 years from now. While, I mean, the main part of our sort of science pages in the newspapers are about these new discoveries. So it starts from the researcher who wants to bring this knowledge to the public. I would like to start from the other side, ask the society, what is your question? What do you want to know about sort of cancer? I mean, yeah, that it would be a better way of sort of educating public. For example, Wikipedia does a better job there because there the initiative comes from the users. They would like to know more, so the article sort of starts expanding, and then you can start sort of bringing evidence and bringing sort of scientific consensus into the knowledge which the users have demanded. I would like to see more opportunities for such type of education.
Would you say that the responsibility or the initial agency to get that started is mostly with individuals who are willing to invest the time?
I don't say anything is on the individuals. I mean, if somebody wants to know something, they will find it. That's for sure. I don't say there is a responsibility. But if you want to see a community moves in a way and sort of respects evidence, respects science, if you want the farmers to respect the science and respect the impact, if you want the community of builders or workers or nurses or respect what are the latest evidence, we should meet their needs and really ask them from the beginning what are their insights, what are the practical questions that we might have sort of skipped or simplified in the defining the research or defining the education package. And that I would say university has this contract can facilitate this conversation, right? Can really facilitate what people need to know. It's not easy. It needs continuous communication, maybe also a continuous flow of the people coming to universities, like teachers who spend one day a week to university. That needs all the actors to be involved in that. Teachers need that. The administration of the schools need to create the opportunity for that, but university has to also create its opportunity. And this is happening in many aspects that we find important. This is happening. In my department, we think that high school students need to know more about quantum mechanics, so creative facilitation of the teachers to actually learn how to teach quantum mechanics. So they come to the department, learn that, and then go back to the high school they are teaching. And this can happen in all the other aspects. This is one community of the teachers, for example. The same happens with the other communities. I think this can go on. And yeah, you can ask what are the best ways of creating this sort of workflow. Yeah, I mean, research projects which are defined in partnership with the citizens or with the communities. This is again one way of doing it, and we have initiatives which do that, and that can be facilitated. I think some communities do that better than the others, but this is already being done, and I think it is a good way. We can just connect it to the practical problems that we would like to be discussed.
Would you say that there's a special difficulty in approaching such or using such an approach when it comes to sustainability or environmental matters, or on the contrary, would you say that the universal nature of the issue makes it easier?
I've never been in the other side of the position to bring this discussion, but I mean, again, take this example of what we have. Yes, there is a problem I had faced, for example. We had the question of what is a sustainable university. And in our, in the neighbor faculty, there is a research unit that calculates what is the carbon footprint of any product, right? Life cycle analysis, they call it. And, you know, you get a computer and say, you know, how much CO2 has been generated in producing this computer, which is partly the labor, shipment, all the activities, and you can calculate that. So I sort of brought this question sincerely, say, you know, can you calculate the carbon footprint of my salary? What am I contributing? What have been put into it? You know, what part of the tax which is paid, or the GDP growth of my society is based on, you know, carbon intensive activities. This is extremely difficult thing to calculate. So now we cannot do that. This is not a standard commodity, or I don't know, the value chain is not very clear. So we cannot do that. So it's clearly the science could not answer my practical question. So we need sort of to define a new way of finding, which means that either I have to go and start becoming a sustainability scholar myself, start searching all the articles of a field which I totally have no idea how this is sort of structured, to find out my answer, or sort of start a long process of defining a project which is about carbon footprint of you know, assistant professor salary. And well, this is a very long process, and not really attractive for many academics. And I think that comes back to this sort of long-term, short-term nature of scientific projects that we define, or academic projects that we define. This is a bottleneck I agree with.
Very interesting, thank you. We have we have one question and we have one comment in the Q&A. These are especially relevant for the upcoming, for the last part, for the discussion regarding what we can actually do. For that reason, before I move on, if there are any additional questions from the participants, now is the time. Otherwise, I would use the question and the comment as a nice segue into the last part of our discussion. Prior to that, though, now the last part of the discussion will be a bit different, and we will give you the opportunity to actually make contributions and to unmute your mic and say something. So if you'd like to add something, just put up your hand. You can see the hand symbol in the lower taskbar. And then you will be unmuted, and then you can make a contribution. Prior to that, one of the questions asks, what role should students and also activist groups play in this? And furthermore, the comment is, I think that academics and students have to build networks with each other to make demand stronger. It's a good point that communication to individuals has to be better, but making demands has to be made as a collective. These are valuable points, which bring us essentially to the question, now that we've outlined roughly what a sustainable university is, or what it can be, and some of the things that might be done, the question remains, what can university staff and especially students do? So and this to our participants. If you have anything to add, feel free now. Otherwise, I would like to ask you, Sanli, what is your experience from Utrecht and from the Young Academy initiative? What do you think, and what do you see as in student initiatives?
Student initiatives or staff initiatives? Because we don't have any students in the.
Okay, then academy. Let us start with staff initiatives.
Yeah, I mean, again, staff we have different sort of ranks at the university. In Young Academy, we are mostly young, so early career. But well, some of us have a higher say in their departments and faculties than the rest. I'm not completely sure what do you want. I mean, of course, the fact that a university body, a group of sort of academics, in our case, talks beyond its immediate impact community, right? Its immediate discipline is always very useful because it's a bit unnatural, I would say. So that always echoes pretty well and it's listened to pretty well. I think that's pretty important. So my sort of very general advice, if you have no idea what to do, is of course talk about it. That's really number one, that every individual, but also every institution can start right away. Just make this a talkable point, right? It's like, and it happens in the times of certainty, right? Public health or personal health or personal hygiene is not something that we generally talk about at the university. But when it comes to the pandemic, the university talk about washing hands with each other, which could have been unthinkable before, to tell your colleagues to wash your hands. So this making it a point of discussion, I think, is the first step. And this is much easier if you have a group of sort of people, generally faculties, which are not connected to the same community. So they are coming from different communities and from different approach, and all they say the same thing. This immediately creates a larger impact than these individuals saying it. Because, if the humanities say that, or the scientists say, these humanities always have strange ideas, or if the scientists say that, they say, these engineers have, mechanistic thoughts. But if they come together and tell it all together, this creates a larger impact. It's also a more difficult process because they have to find a common language and also agree on the common narrative of their message. That's the compromise that has to be made. But I think that's where one way of actually making the impact larger. Again, we have many assistant professors at Utrecht University, but we have one Young Academy at Utrecht University. So that's the fact that we already taken this to the next level of talking with a common language, with a common message. This is a very valuable effort. And I think to combine students and staff, this is another level which has been very, very powerful. Like we see that, for example, for the discussion of work pressure, when the students join staff in their message and then give a common message, this is suddenly much sort of higher impact, because these are the communities that if you split them, they have sort of different needs and sometimes, different interests. That's I think that's the power of making common efforts. And I think that's also more reachable. This is the discussion I had in one of the sort of Extinction Rebellion came to our department and asked, say, we would like to also make such an act in Schiphol or in front of a city hall. Of course, then as an academic, you sort of reduce your position to a citizen, which is fine. You are also a citizen, but you also have to expect the impact of a citizen from that action. While inside the sort of your institution, inside your director, you have a larger impact, you have a larger weight. Of course, you have also a larger stake because you have a daily interaction with them. I don't see the prime minister on a daily basis, so if he gets upset and me blocking his car, well, I'm not going to drink coffee with him the next day. But if I sort of, I don't know, block the class of my fellow teacher, then the next day the impact is much larger on that. And this is, of course, naturally also difficult, but can be more effective. Like we have this with Amazon, the Amazon workers. It is very difficult to sort of influence them from outside because it's a company. But when the employees actually become active, they can have very high impact. The same with Google, which had to cancel, the contracts of the company with the Department of Defense, for example. That's where I say, understand your domain, make it speakable, make it a point in your domain, and maybe starting there also can be a good point.
What you're alluding to could be broadly understood also as how to communicate more broader. And I would like to bring this back to the student level and also, again, address the participants, as you've seen in the chat. If you've got anything to add, just raise your hand. But also, if you just like to pose questions, that's fine as well. But maybe let me begin here with the question to you as well as those listening. One of the issues that I sometimes see and also think about a lot is that climate change, climate disruption, climate crisis knowledge by now is fairly well known, and the knowledge of the issue might not be broad, but the issue is on the agenda of most people. Nonetheless, it sometimes appears that there can be made a clear distinction between those who are actively involved, who are passionate about it, and who'd like to do something, and those who might know about it but are not really active, but just see it as something outside of their own horizon or scope of relevance. How can we, as students, better talk about the issue? How can we communicate with those who are not yet invested, so to speak, or sold on the issue?
Yeah, so I could have anticipated this question. This is a topic that I also face, and I really recommend watching, for example, the lectures of René Leersman, who is a psychologist, have worked on these environmental issues for a very long time. She brings these concepts of empathy, but above all, she calls it, the climate change issue is very big, right? It has a lot of impact, and this is sort of quite difficult and it's also far. It's far from your immediate actions that you can take tomorrow and the impact you can see from it. So it's pretty difficult for human psychology to sort of have a constant sort of balanced alarm of, I have to adjust my daily activities so much because of the impact. I think the solution there, and that's something I'm practicing myself, is to meet people where they are, right? If you are to talk to other students, first you have to ask, what are their sort of concerns? If the concerns are about jobs or future career, it's related to climate. You can say, look how the market of energy is shifting. So if you want to, think about jobs, look at the market, and you need to know what the energy transition is about and what it requires. If your concerns are about, biodiversity, because that's something that you need, you want to study it, look, if you want to become a researcher and really academic interest, then your chance of studying these species will go down by time, because there are fires or these things are inaccessible, or our labs are closing. So meet people where they are and then start from there, as opposed to tell them the message that you're absolutely convinced that has to happen, and then try to convince them this should be as important for them as it is for you. And believe me, there is enough stakes in the sort of the transformation to a sustainable society, and also reacting to impact of the climate change, that from every angle you start, people can get in. And this holds also for all the other public, right? If you go to a community and they're sort of the immediate concern is sort of the security of water for the next year, then you can actually start from that. This is something that it is important, and look the impact of climate change on what you are concerned about. I think that's a better entry point than talking about the beauty of environment, or the importance of the biodiversity as a whole, as a sort of common human responsibility, because then you make it very far from my immediate impact and make me feel powerless in face of the big challenge ahead. It's not in my domain of action, while these are my daily concerns. I just have to adjust it and be truthful on the impact of this big thing on my daily activities, and sort of adjust to that.
From this, one thing that I was wondering is what you're describing to talk to people where they stand. Surely that's not an easy skill, and if especially if we look at younger students or people who are just like really becoming more adept at communicating knowledge and also their own positions. Do you feel that it is a part of the role of the university to provide that kind of training, or do you rather see this kind of initiative to be located somewhere else?
I think absolutely this is one of the aspects that people come to university for, right? That these are, again, adapting to the future, getting the knowledge of, this is part of the social contract. Where in the university life you can put this, that's a different question. It can be not in the curriculum, but in the social activities of the university, or even just in the voids that the university creates can be dedicated to that. So, one solution to this would be not to add another lecture, but actually reduce a lecture to create opportunity of people sort of going, doing, community activities, or just think them by themselves, but giving them this opportunity in their life to think of something big and, treating them like adults, which they are, and asking them to, take responsibility of that. This is one way. Of course, the consciousness of it should be in the community of the university, and I think the actors have the best will to create this consciousness. If the opportunities are there, that's maybe something that the university can facilitate. And this is not at all something new for the university. I give you one example, like the opening of the academic year and the ceremonies. These are very important events, and university appreciates that, because it was one of the biggest concerns for example, opening of the academic year was what to do with the sort of opening celebrations or the student activities. The fact that university supports the student organizations is because the university understands that parts of its social contract is upward mobility, and upward mobility comes by mixing students of different backgrounds with each other and letting them to create new networks. So it's possible to indirectly also create these opportunities without, putting the headline of or planning this activity. Whether we'd be fast enough or sufficient, I don't know, but at least that's one of the areas that we can try and pay attention to. And I think green offices are one of the sort of means that the universities are trying to create these opportunities. Whether they are successful or not depends on the type of activities.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We have one participant, which wants to make a contribution. We're currently finding out. We're currently trying to unlock you. So maybe in the meantime, Marvin from the other participants said that he fully agrees that we should have more space for community building. And okay, so now you can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Speaking of green offices, I personally work at the Green Office on education and sustainability strategy at the University of Leiden. And I was wondering what you think would be effective things that a Green Office could do in making sure that a university goes to a sustainability transition. Because while we have this institutional mandate, we, at least most people who work at a Green Office are not very embedded in the academic world and like the academic culture of academic freedom, and the way like research grants are being allocated, etc. So what would be an effective way for a Green Office to still promote sustainability in education and research?
Yeah. Well, I think like all the rest of the supportive staff in the Green Office at the university can actually play a very bold role, and they already play a very bold role in what the direction of university is, what they demand. I mean, first and foremost is that they can also demand for their work conditions to be connected to it. And then it's not about really, again, operations, but the meaning, right? If you think that your contribution to sustainability would be much more by contributing to certain projects at the university, then that's a demand that can be made. And the mixing can start from there. I wish actually the supporter staff had more mixing. I say a lot of our supporter staff have academic degrees, they have PhDs, other academic training, but sort of they sit in the other offices and they never come to the lab floor. It would have been very nice if these kind of mixings could have been started. There are, strategic programs of the universities are opportunities for this, because these are programs which are mostly written in the confines of the university bestuurgebouw, the management building, and sort of it's talking operational managers to operational managers. But at some point they have to be executed, and some of them are not executed effectively because of this separation of the buildings. And I think those are opportunities that the university can create this mixing. We have, maybe sustainability is one example which is still not as developed as I want it to be, even in Utrecht, but open science is another one, right? We have recognized in the past 5-6 years that open science is not something that you can just leave to a certain academic level or leave it to the funders, but everybody has to be engaged in. So I was involved in that, and when we wrote the open science program of the university, we talked as well with the academics and with the sort of line managers, the operations of the university, and got everybody's perspective. And in executing it, it's the same. So you have to bring all these people to the same table. I think just being direct and saying that this is what I really think has the highest impact for me being at university is to engage in the research or in research project rather than calculate sort of imagine I have to calculate as a green office, calculate the carbon footprint of university, but I can say, I'm creating this knowledge. If I can contribute to a research group which is calculating this on a much bigger scale of the country, then that's a way of creating impact for the green office, which is both academic but also pretty pragmatic and sort of performative.
Thanks very much.
This is. You can also invite academics. I think that's also one way of really engaging. So invite them with workshops or in your decisions to come. Most of the people I've seen going around in the green offices in our university were students, which is a really nice opportunity for them. But you can also create more opportunities for other sort of trenches of the university community to also come.
Are there any, among the participants, are there any follow-up questions regarding the Green Office? Because if not, I would like to, at least in part, address one other question quickly. Maybe I will just quote it, maybe. Maybe weird to ask this question to an attendant, but does the Green Office person know if the Green Office is connected? I am assuming this means connection between the green offices of different universities. Yes, Sam, if you would like to answer this directly, then we would unmute you, and then you could help us with that.
Yeah, to some extent, we are connected. There is a Dutch association of Green Office. It's called Studenten voor Morgen, so Students for Tomorrow. And there's also some informal contact. But yes, I do think that there is an area for improvement here by connecting students and staff involved with the green offices to, for example, exchange best practices.
All right, thanks very much. Maybe this brings us to the last question then. If we speak about the green office and what students can do, up until now, we've mostly spoken about things which are civil in nature, which are part of the institutional fabric, I would say. What do you think is the role of climate protests, of civil disobedience in this?
Well, there are two things. Climate protest and civil disobedience are sort of, civil disobedience, I would say, one is one form of protesting. there are many forms of protesting, and I think whenever people see the dissonance between what they think should happen and what they are told to do, the protest happens. Sometimes you avoid it by filling the paperwork. Sometimes you vote so-called by your feet and not do certain things. And sometimes you take the action bolder and also try to amplify your action by sort of putting your body as a symbol of sort of sacrifice or devotion to the cause that you're protesting for. I think maybe to raise the urgency of certain issues, protests are very effective, but also extremely tiring. I've been in a couple of them. So it has to be always coupled of what the action which is now, because it's like it's a one-time event. And it's very good to bring people together, for example, or bring things to the attention of the target audience that you have for that. But there will always be also a next step and keeps people involved. And maybe those involvements, if they are sort of facilitated nicely, in the long run have larger impact. So if the fact that I spend 5 minutes a day thinking of something or taking an action every day can be larger than, spending 2-3 days, protesting in a coal mine collectively together. So I would say it might be a combination. And some people, maybe it's a matter of age or a matter of comfort, are more convenient to do things which on a more regular basis. And these opportunities should be created. And this also needs work. And this is also, it's also a very nice means of keeping the dialogue going. Again, one of the problems with protests is that the dialogue might discontinue for any other reason, health or fatigue or other things. But if you have a common project, then the opportunity of talking about it continues, because apart from the cause, you have to do other practices. If I have a video project, or one of the projects we are doing now is called Help Desk Klimat, which is just answering questions. A lot of time we spend on this project is about just doing the sort of groundwork of translating a sort of an answer in the scientific language into something accessible, or bringing an expert to answer a question. This is just it's a very generic work, but the fact that we are continuously doing it and we are talking about it keeps this body of action together, and I think that's pretty impactful as well. I mean, I'm in a sense doing that. I'm protesting by not focusing on the thing that my immediate community thinks I should be focusing on, because they think this is the norm, and that is already an act of protest, which I definitely support.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sanli. Thanks in total. I think this was an incredibly valuable discussion. I would once again like you, those of you who are listening to us, to ask some more questions if more questions arise, or to help us with your contributions. If that is not the case, I would at this point slowly wrap this up. I think we covered a lot of ground. And,
I want to add one more topic, because I didn't see that coming, but I think that's again something meeting academics where they are, because they would like to come sort of contribute to the body of knowledge. That's the main reason that academics choose academia, and also many students come because they love science, and there are sort of new forms of science creation which are more adapted to the needs of sustainable society. And I think learning about those means are also acts of moving towards a more sustainable academia, And that's one thing which I think every one of us, whatever we think our role is in the transformation to the sustainability, can benefit from. And that's to learn about these new forms of creation of science. You might have heard about digital commons or science commons, open science. These are all new ways which are not necessarily concentrated in academia, but are, I think, more adaptive and more compatible with the type of development we need. Maybe the traditional way of teaching science or doing research is not completely adapted to it, but I see this a real opportunity for the younger generations or open-minded generations to contribute to this new form, and it directly also influences, and it also requires a lot of intelligence, a lot of brain power, and action to make this happen. So seeing these connections is really helpful. So if you don't know what is digital commons or what is commons or open science, I would say these are the things that you have to maybe investigate. And sometimes you see contradictions in this investigation that has to be resolved before sort of a new child is born on this type of activity.
Maybe as a follow-up question, do you see these new forms of science or production of scientific knowledge, do you see these as existing next to established forms of science, or do you see these as replacing them in the long term?
I think in the long run, because they are scaling faster. I mean, I don't know many computer scientists here, but in the 90s, there were the open source hardware, open source software, and there were sort of closed source hardware. They were not really compatible with each other. People at IBM or Microsoft were not happy about it. But now everything is, of course, open source, because that has become the common way of building new software projects. And I think this has happened in other sort of domains of science as well. Once the problems have been sort of focused on certain labs, on certain directions defined by the community, and there have been people who, as the knowledge expands and more people can contribute to knowledge, have found new forms of contributing to knowledge creation. And these are just by nature more scalable and more adapt to complex problems. And I think that's the way that people will do science more and more. It has a lot of benefits, but for this topic, it's the benefit of scalability. One example is, for example, frugal science, right? It's one thing to discover a new method or a new device or new element in the lab with a lot of research. It's another thing to make this accessible for a wide population. And sometimes it's sort of equally difficult question to answer. How to pasteurize milk or how to purify water can be done in lab, but how to pasteurize it for billion people, or how to provide clean water to I don't know, the whole world, or 3 billion people who don't have access to it. This is totally different solution. And when you put constraints on such problems, it automatically becomes a very difficult problem, right? I can build a water purifier maybe in my lab if I want, but if I have the constraint of I have only, I don't know, 100 euros to spend on it, then that becomes a completely different challenge. And these are typical questions which are actually getting more and more attention by established scientists as well as young scientists. And these are new forms of doing science and doing research which lend themselves more to complex problems we have. And I think paying attention to that as you're educating yourself is a very good investment.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks I think this was a good parting word. And at this point, I mean, we're nearing the end of our time today. And I hope that all of you listening enjoyed it as much as we did, and were able to learn something new and potentially even gained a better understanding of what we can do at the university, whether it be students, scholars, or us as people in broader society. On behalf of DACH, first of all, and myself, we would like to thank you, Sanli, for taking the time. And we really enjoyed the conversation. I certainly did. And I hope all of you did so as well. And so thanks for joining us. We will be looking to organize more events on this topic broadly, but also on others. So keep your eyes peeled on social media and all the other canals where you can follow us. And have a good weekend.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.